talking about rewiring your identity, change that lasts. The difference is we all know if you're honest, I always love hypnotists that act like, no, I do one session, they totally change, they never have another issue, all that stuff. Lets me know that they're probably internet marketers and not really in the NLP hypnosis or coaching world. Because real change happens at a different level. And so again, I always start with, how can you enjoy today like never before? Ask yourself a few questions to get started. This flips on your reticular activating system in a slightly different way. But let's do it a little different. Today, ask yourself, what do I want to learn? What do I want to learn? And what do I want to change? Is there anything in your life you'd like to change? And who do you want to be? Right? So it's just kind of interesting when it gets to that, right? But when do people change, right? There's a lot of thought. When they hurt enough, nobody just, I always think of, I know I really talk a lot about addiction recovery, but it's the world I'm in a lot. People don't just wake up and go, it's a great Wednesday morning, I think I'm going to quit drinking, right? It's usually, they wake up in, the back seat of a squad car or jail or, nobody's talking to them. There's some kind of physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, or financial pain. But it has to be enough to actually, excuse me real quick, actually hurt. That's why then you'll begin to change, or at least start it. But you can't change till maybe you see enough. If you wake up in the back of the squad car and blame the cops, right? If you, I could relate to that. It's not my fault. It's the po-po. God, I hate when old white guys try to sound like they know what they're doing. But it's like you have to see it. Do you see the problem? Those of us that really coach people know they may be hurting, but when you point out, well, maybe it's your drinking. No, it's not that. It's something else. And then you have to receive enough help. What are you holding up, Bruce?
You have to let Michelle back in.
Oh, I just did. So, all right. So then you have to receive enough information, enough help. And it doesn't necessarily, when I heard Jim Rohn or no, somebody talk about this, one of the guys from the 70s, 60s, and 70s. And he said, it may be that little act of kindness, that really makes someone start to change, right? So whatever it is, but to have to receive something, maybe information, that's what I think isn't everything, but it's the first step. And finally, they have to learn how to change. And again, coming from the addiction world, if you have an addiction, alcohol, drugs, sex, gambling, whatever the addiction is, you have to learn how not to do that. It sounds trite, but if that's been your whole life, none of this Nancy Reagan crap, just say no. It's like that, plus if that worked, everybody here that's spent thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars on psychology or hypnosis training, you just wasted your money. You just have to say no. So, but you have to learn how. What is the steps? Maybe get a mentor. It's the whole 12-step world. You get somebody who knows how to do it. Maybe you go to a therapist or a hypnotist, and they begin to give you the agents of change. So why does change fail? Even if you have all these things, right? You have some pain, you're sick and tired of it, you see it, you know you could change, you actually know how. So why doesn't people change? Why don't people change? Well, I think it's you're fighting behavior, not the identity, right? You have to have an identity shift for a lot of really deep change, as Carl Jung said, you have to have a psychic awakening, a psychic change. So real change happens at the identity level, which is one of my favorite things to talk about. So, you don't break habits, you become someone new, right? When that happens, things really begin to shift, right? When you become a different person, right? So you're not fighting not eating that donut. You're just going, no, I'm not going to eat that, right? You're not fighting taking a drink, right? It's just not who you are anymore, right? And so what's the chain? Well, what's the chain, right? Well, it's basically this. This is, to me, it's a theory. It's just what I think works. I'm trying to remember where I got it from so I could quote the person. But it's your self-talk. What's your self-talk? Your constant, unedited self-talk. That'll build your beliefs, right? That shapes your attitude, beliefs. A lot of these kind of drift back and forth, right? But that makes your mindset. Are you positive or are you negative? Or are you a toward person? This is what we call NLP, our meta programs. Are you away from, right? These are what's forming your personality, which is a combination of who you see yourself as and who other people see you as, right? And at the deepest level, all of these things put together forms your identity. Who are you when you look in the mirror? Who are you when no one else is looking, right? And when you shift there, things begin to shift, right? And so self-talk matters, right? Self-talk matters. Especially the I am statements. It's in the Bible, it's in the New Testament, the Old Testament, the Indian writings, Sanskrit. They all talk about the sacred I am, and as Neville Goddard says, when, according to his thinking, and I like this, when it says you don't use the Lord's name in vain, it has nothing to do with saying God damn it or anything bad about that. It has to do with cursing yourself, right? Saying like, I'm stupid, I'm broke, I'm whatever it is, right? So what are your I am statements constantly? What slips out when no one's looking? And if they're repeated, they start to install a belief, right? And of course, when you're a little kid, I could have done a whole talk on when you're a little kid before, depending on kind of thinking you have before about the ages of 5 to 8, you don't have those factors beginning to filter stuff out. So if you're told you're stupid, you're told you're fat, you're told you're lazy, that becomes who you are, right? And even older, if you get put into an emotionally charged state, and then someone gives you a direct command, right? It can become a belief. And whether it's true or not, even later, when you may not believe, you may have cognitive data that it's not true. It's still, it's a fight. I'll self-disclose one I had is I was in like elementary school, 5th or 6th grade. And I don't know, you're like trying to sing something in school where you had to sing as a group. And of course, this is how it usually goes. A couple of my friends, they could just hit whatever note. They're like, the one person he had the ear for it. He could just, ding on the piano. He'd hit that note. Shall we say, I could not do that, right? And I remember and so it's the old, law of reverse effect, as all of us hypnotists know. The harder you try, the harder it becomes. And my voice tightened up and it made it worse. And of course, so I'm in a highly charged emotional state. There's all my peers, everything you have going on. And the caring, compassionate teacher goes, you're just tone deaf. Sit down. Right? Fast forward 30, 40 years, I'm in all these musicals, right? And I would never sing. If they had a song, I'd go up and even before we started, can we take that song out and give it to somebody else? And I usually played the comic leads and everything else. Anyway, was it true? Was I really tone deaf? I took a lot of work, a lot of money, and a lot of time. I stumbled into a voice teacher who he was in Titanic on Broadway, Jesus Christ Superstar, he was an opera singer, and he was the musical director for a play I was in. And again, I'm like, well, I don't want to, and I can't do this. I go, his name was Carlo. He's now gone. Carlo, I'm tone deaf, right? And he's the coolest guy. He goes, sweetheart, I've heard you speak. You have a great voice. No one's tone deaf. You just don't know how to hear notes. Now, that was never explained to me, right? So I spent the next 6 months just learning notes, and then I could begin to sing, and I've sung songs in musicals. To this day, when I listen to something, I was something online, a thing from a play, I could tell that they weren't on note. I'm still not good enough to figure out were they sharp or high or were they flat and low. I don't, but I could tell they weren't on note, right? So anyway, but that I know, and I kept saying it to myself, I'm tone deaf, I'm tone deaf. Don't worry about it, So you have to do that. But these beliefs drive your behavior. So I would never even try to take voice lessons. I would never try to do anything. Those of us that do this change work, how many times by the time a client comes to see us, you ask them that question, they've probably not tried to get the help, right? They've lost hope. So, beliefs is what drives your behavior, not your goals, not your motivation, not even necessarily your skill set, right? It's what do you believe? You believe you can or do you believe you can't, right? The old Henry Ford is credited with it, but it goes back a long time. So, but your beliefs begin to form your attitude. What's your attitude? Is that you can do something or you can't do something, right? There's a reason why certain organizations go out of their way to install certain beliefs, right? We have one here on this call that I know for sure, and Billy's worked with him for years. I did some work with him. Little group called the United States Marine Corps, right? They will constantly, they install the belief of, I can, they're a Marine. Marines do this, right? And they hold through better than most organizations I've ever seen. So anyway, so what's your attitude, right? And your attitude becomes your mindset, positive, negative, action-oriented or contemplative. All these things begin to default to the type of thinking that you have, right? And again, it's set as you're growing up. It can be altered, but it takes a little work, right? And my favorite, it becomes your temperament, right? Mindset becomes your temperament. Are you hot-headed? Do you get angry easy? The play I'm in now, the guy playing the lead, he's a hothead. That's what he's supposed to be, right? And he's a real nice guy. So it took a while for the director to get him to go angry and loud, right? So because it becomes how you react automatically. That's your mindset, right? It's also why a lot of us in the hypnosis NLP world, we like going to some of these conferences. IAC's coming up, the Guild, the one in Vegas. There's lots of these conferences, right? And the people that go usually have a different mindset, right, than those that don't go, right? But even at the conferences, you hear, I gave a talk at this once a few years ago, I think it was at HypnoThought, or the Guild, they get changed in my mind. But we were talking about, what's your mindset? What's your attitude? So I was talking about this, and it was about making money in the field of hypnosis, right? And one guy kept saying, well, everyone knows you can't really make money at this. And then he went all the way, well, I don't make much money because I'm a real hypnotist. I'm like, okay, all right, okay. The other big pet peeve for me is when someone calls it a calling, it's like a calling. It's a calling, And I go, yeah. And the Vatican's the most expensive place on the planet. So you could still make money and have a calling. Sorry, my cynicism runs deep. It's part of my temperament, part of my personality, right? Because your temperament becomes your personality. How's that for a setup? Right? Who you are seen as externally and who you see yourself as, right? And your goal is for your personality to align with your identity, who you really believe you are. And when it gets that deep, it doesn't matter what other people believe, you have to believe it, right? Best story I have for this, and you don't have to be a sports fan, but it makes sense. There was a guy who was the backup quarterback on a team that had like a really great quarterback, right? I don't know if it was, I think it was all the way back, the quarterback, I get too lost in details, that's what old guys do. It was John Elway, who's one of the greatest to ever play, right? And his backup quarterback, somebody was interviewing him. And they go, well, you have to admit, John's this. He goes, yeah, John's a great quarterback. And something was said. He goes, hey, but I think I should be starting. I should have the job. I can do this. Right. And it made a big brouhaha. And I got back, what do you think the coach or the John Elway would say? And they both said, well, if he didn't have that attitude, we wouldn't want him on the team. Because if I get hurt, he will be the quarterback or whatever it is. Right. And again, from the acting world that I'm still a part of, you always hear that about people that audition for a movie and don't get it. And someone else say, well, you have to admit they did the best job. And I forget who it was, but they went, no, I'd have done better. It's like, but that's his identity, if that makes any sense, right? And so, if you get that identity, if that's who you are, regardless of what's going on, it begins to control all your behaviors. Who are you? Are you a person that just eats healthy? Is that your identity? I'm 80% healthy eater, or is it something you have to force yourself to do? I really see this in people that exercise. Right? It's just who they are. Right? People that go to the gym, 3, 4, 5 days a week. That's just who they are. They don't have to force that. Some days they may have to kind of push themselves to go, but generally that's just who they are. Right? I was at the Guild one year and I ran across the street got up a little early, ran across the street. Same thing happened at Hypno Thoughts too for Miss Karen. I know she likes HD, right? I was at the gym there, right? And there were 3 of us. I think Michelle was there one time. There were like 3 or 4 of us in the gym, right? And same thing happened at the Guild when I came back from Planet Fitness and was eating breakfast before the conference started. And somebody goes, well, and I go, no. You guys talk about health. I try to live it. You could have, the one at Hypno Thoughts, because somebody later said, well, it's just, and this is when you know what's going on. It's just easy for you. I looked at the guy and said, no, I wasn't sucking down beer and smoking a joint at 1 a.m. like I think you were. It's how I could get up at 7 a.m. Anyway, God love everybody. I don't judge as I'm judging. But, your identity, once it becomes who you are, it just becomes automatic, right? And it can change again, right? And I got to do my little caveat on, I should have put this slide up. One of the biggest myths is it takes 21 days to make or break a habit. Once you do something for 21, 28, of course, as Billy would say, he's the numbers guy. The research is all over the place, right? 60, 80, whatever the number is. But even if you do something hundreds of times, it may not become part of your identity, or it may be a part of your identity. And my evidence for this, ladies and gentlemen, I would say is you see a young man or girl, I won't be, politically incorrect, a young person go into the military, right? And of course, they go boot camp, you exercise all the time. And, maybe you're in an Army or Marine Corps unit, right? Where they, nothing Billy against the Navy, but the Army and especially in combat arms in the Army and all the Marines, they just got to work out. It's part of their deal, right? And so you see them, at 22, they're a Lance Corporal in the Marine Corps, they're a Spec 4 in the Army. They're in great shape. They look good in their uniform, right? And I'll give Patrick kudos, especially the Marines in their little dress blues. They look good, right? They look good, right? Fine. So that means they're working out all the time. With their unit, they do the PT every day, Great, right? Then they get out of the Corps, right? And you run into them 2 years later, and the guy that had the squared away uniform, everything pressed, they look great. The 30-inch waist, the 44-inch chest, they were rocking it, right? and you run into them 2 years later, they got the beer gut, they're wearing a stained t-shirt, right? And so even though, let's say they spent 4 years, in the Corps, 4 years in the Army combat units, they worked out literally, well, 365 times 4, most of those days, let's say 1,400 times within a few years. It should be, if you believe that, well, once it becomes a habit, why didn't they keep doing it? Right? Well, it's because it was a part of their identity. It wasn't their identity, right? The ones that seemed to keep it were the guys that went into the military in shape, and they were already working out, not just for basics or, to make jump school or whatever we're doing. So it was just part of who they were. Is that, and if they were squared away, they were squared away, right? And just as importantly for this group, because there's how many people here, 16 of us, it's your peer group, right? When you're in the Marines, they kind of hold you to a different standard, right? It's just different, right? I think it was Jim Rohn says, if I know the 5 people you hang around with, I can guess your income, right? Because you will kind of hang around with people with the same kind of income, right? When I go to these conferences, not because conference season's coming up, and I suggest everyone go to at least one. It doesn't matter which one. Is you ever notice the successful hypnotists hang out with the successful hypnotists, right? And it's not that they're pushing everybody else away, hey, come on in. It's just like, so what kind of, it's that core group, so I say, not just as Jim Rohn would say, not just about your income level, but I mean, obviously your education level, but also, in shape people hang around with in shape people generally, at least at some level, right? That's, why do I go to a health club? Well, I like to see other people in shape. It just lets me know that it's possible, right? So, but that's part of your identity. So your identity controls your behavior, right? And so why do people stay stuck would be the big question, right? Well, they're fighting, the behavior with the identity, right? There's a reason when you go to, and I've had this conversation many a time when I used to work in alcohol and drug units a lot more than I'm not now at all. It's been a year, I think, or going on a year. Whereas, someone comes into treatment, especially when I worked at the ones that were more insurance-based, so people had money, they'd show up with a Budweiser t-shirt on, right? Or a shirt like this, but but it would have like the dope leaf thing, right? And when I was clinical director, you can't wear that shirt. We'll get you another shirt. Well, I'm not changing. Well, then excuse my language, get the fuck out. Well, it's like, obviously you didn't, I gave this kind of talk at treatment center. Obviously you didn't pay attention to what I was saying, yeah. Looks a little funny at an AA meeting, somebody with I've never seen it, somebody with any time sitting there in like a, Miller Lite t-shirt, right? It's like, here's a blast from the past. I remember doing a stop smoking seminar, right? And I'm sitting at the desk, I'm taking the money in from people, and they're giving me the form and the money, and I'm saying, okay, here's your stuff, and where the room is. It was a big group thing. And as I'm sitting there like this, I'm doing that. Some guy said, "You're the guy that's going to get me to quit smoking," right? So as I start to look up, first thing I see is he had a big Marlboro belt buckle, right? Then I keep scanning, my eyes are coming up, and he's wearing like a Marlboro racing jacket. This is back in probably the late 90s, right? And I knew it before I looked at his face. He had a Marlboro hat on, And so the guy said that, and I said, "Sir, it's going to be a tough road to hoe for you, I think," and And so then he said something. I go, well, you're like the Marlboro Man. Yeah, that's right. I'm like the Marlboro Man. Yeah, yeah, rugged, tough. And I go, so you're like a cowboy. And he goes, yeah. I go, is that like, the tough cowboy or the Brokeback Mountain cowboy? All right. And he just, I'm like, hey, they're cowboys. And that was the attempt of a pattern interrupt. I don't know if it worked. I really hope the guy made it. But that's why we stress repetition, right? Listening. I mean, don't you all love when you'd be doing a session with somebody and you record it and you say, give it to them, say, listen to this every day, or at least once a day, every day till you come back next week and come back next week. How's it going? Not real good. It's not really working, Doc or Karen, Carol. Oh, how many times you listen to your recording? Oh, I didn't have time. Right. Well, last week you told me this is the most important damn thing in your life. Now you're telling me you couldn't make 20 minutes. Uh, good luck. So anyway, but repetition starts doing it. So that's where, like, for the self-talk, which is, I think, one of the most important things, it has to be constant, constant self-talk, as Neville Goddard said, don't allow anyone into your temple when you're doing the self-talk, right? So and when you find yourself slipping back, because we may, right? You have to interrupt the pattern. You have to interrupt the pattern, right? I remember, self-disclose, I was doing a play and I had a song, a duet song with this person, and I was supposed to sing the high note. She was going to sing the low note, and scared the shit out of me, right? And so my voices start, you're tone deaf. Who the fuck do you think you, excuse my language, this is my inner dialogue. It's not nice. Who the fuck do you think you are? Da, 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 da. And it's literally, they're finishing the scene before it, right? And so as I'm standing there, I go, what the hell am I going to do? All this training, all this seemed to disappear. And then, I don't know, sometimes God takes care of fools, and God knows I fit that. I heard this voice go, shut the fuck up. If Paul Lynde can win a Tony Award, for I forget the play where, he talked the song and he won a Tony Award. So just go have fun, right? Plus it wasn't an equity show. They weren't paying me a lot of money. So, hey, but that interrupted the pattern, right? And I think, and I always tell people, it takes a while. So you don't fight it, you replace it. I think it was Orman McGill. I heard him talk once, and he said, what you do is say thank you to the negative voice, thank you, and then replace it with what you want. But I'd rather say this to myself, right? So anyway, so again, the chain is, the self-talks, your self-talk forms your beliefs. And once you get a belief, that'll reinforce your self-talk, which reinforces your attitude. And your attitude reinforces all of these. And your mindset goes to your personality. And finally, you'll get an identity. Who do you want to be, right? You have to be the person, like someone wants to make money. I've heard over and over again, from Tony Robbins to Zig Ziglar, they all say that. It's not what you do, it's who you are. Right? You have to change your identity, right? And so apply this to real situations, right? So I just wanted to put that out there. I love this stuff about the chain, like self-talk builds, builds, builds. Can you say it? I'll teach you a magic trick. I'm going to teach later on a mental magic trick. And this is a Neville Goddard one that was rarely talked about, where he would say, a way to do this with for your inner dialogue is to say, I remember when I couldn't pay my bills, right? Because somewhere your brain clicks it into, well, that means you must be paying your bills now. And then replace it with, but now I can pay this. I remember when I couldn't pay cash for a car, but now I think I'm going to buy this car, right? It's like, because your brain doesn't And you have to do it consistently, right? Just that I remember when. And it goes to some guy in New York that he was a real estate developer, but a real one. I won't say anymore. But he would say when he'd be looking at a place he was going to redo or build something, he'd say, I remember when this was a blank lot. And then he would describe what he was going to build in detail, right? And so it's just a little mental trick. I love that. And the next NLP today is, let's see, it's going to be the first Wednesday in May, which was May 6th. I got a cool topic I want to talk about, have other people talk about. Is it a past life or a past trauma? Okay, so that's what I want to talk about next time. So, same time, same station. I hope everybody enjoyed this. But again, it's real quick, the chain of how you change. It starts with your self-talk, right? And then build, and then look at your beliefs, your attitudes, your mindset, personality, and eventually your identity. Who are you, right? And just have fun with it. So I'd like to thank you for sharing with me. And again, go to hortonpsychology.com. If you have any questions, just reach out. And as always, wherever you're watching this, click like and subscribe. So you train like a performer to be an elite public speaker. That's coming up soon. Again, if you like this kind of stuff, the thing to avoid is boring people with facts. The things to do is tell a story and excess emotion. That influences people. Wherever you're watching this, make sure you subscribe and please leave a comment and tell everyone around it. I'm looking forward to hearing from you. That's hortonpsychology.com.